"We are equally needed by both the poor and the rich," said the pathologist, and wiped the scalpel on his pants. I was in my 5th year of medical school on call at the ambulance station. One day, the dispatcher gave me a call, laughing. "Go, meet the family. Looks like the Procormish drug addicts are dying off." At the time, those words meant nothing to me, but later everything became clear. Soviet drug addicts often lived in families, but not in the traditional sense, husband and wife. Their families consisted of various drug addicts, both in terms of age and gender. The head of the family was a so-called Dostoevsky, a person who was physically strong, financially responsible, and morally resilient. He was the first in the family and took responsibility for its survival, engaging in raw material procurement. Dostoevsky could wear anything on his head, depending on the season, from nothing to a fur hat. The straw hat, in particular, symbolized poppy straw, the drug of that time. In the Soviet Union, it was officially believed that drug addiction did not exist, so drug addicts carried out their operations at summer cottages, ripping poppies out by the roots without harming the elderly. The drug market had little competition because drug trafficking wasn't yet developed in the country. Drug addict families often lived in shacks where they would dry and package the drugs in plastic bags, which were then packed into suitcases. By the late 80s, those who had actively been involved in this procurement began to physically die off, but many still remember that time as paradise, in contrast to the modern drug market. Modern drug addiction has become much more expensive, and its producers no longer engage in wild harvesting or self-made drugs, as was the case in Soviet times. Now, drugs are brought from Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and other countries. The family of a drug addict was harsh and complicated. When a drug addict lost their physical strength or became no longer needed, they could be expelled from the family. Within these families, there were also rules and duties. One had to formally work, be registered, and maintain the presence of their hat, a symbol of addiction. One example, a drug addict worked as a night watchman at a warehouse, coming in twice to take a bag of drugs. But he wasn't fired because the manager received a salary for him. He was registered in a dormitory where he kept his drugs and continued to live by the rules of his drug addict world. When I, as a doctor, encountered drug addicts, I often came across people whose stories seemed completely normal from society's point of view, but within their families, they were true addicts. However, no matter how their lives developed, drug addicts in the Soviet Union still faced acute social problems, despite the official stance that drug addiction didn't exist in the country. One case I remember, a young man who managed to survive an overdose was transferred to a psychiatric clinic. After treatment, he confessed that for him, real pleasure still lay in drugs. According to him, treatment was only about tying off the withdrawal, meaning reducing the dose of the drug to avoid the withdrawal symptoms. When I visited this drug addict again a few months later, he was in good physical condition, but he admitted that he couldn't quit using drugs. He knew that treatment only provided temporary relief, but didn't address the core issue: addiction. Drug addiction is a disease in which social ties and traditions in a family play a role, but often these family bonds cannot hold a person back from their destructive habit.